Sit back, relax, and join William and Lee on their journey through the strange and mysterious world.
And good evening and welcome to Season 2, Episode 10 of Strange and Mysterious World. We're going to be chatting about the Jaeger bombs. Hey, Will? We're going to have some Jaeger bombs tonight.
How's that for the viewers?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Yugas. Yugas, it's about sort of time measurement, Yugas. But I've heard a couple of stories about guys talking about Yugas, and some of them are saying it's like 263,000 years for one Yuga cycle. There's another guy that says, no, it's 7,000. It's a short, there's a short count and a long count. So obviously we'll chat to Bibhu now. But there's a short count and a long count. The short count is every 7,000 years is a Yuga. So I don't know who to believe in now, dude. So this is going to be quite interesting, I think, once we find out.
Well, I mean, so I'll speak to you about it. So anyway, this episode, we're talking about the Yuga shifts with Bibhu Misra. He's written a book called Yuga Shift. And I've always been interested in the Yuga shifts because it's like the cyclical time of like how human consciousness and how we evolve on planet Earth, like through our consciousness, how we go through a dark age and like a golden age, a bronze age, a golden age, and an enlightened age. It's like, but anyway, people will all describe it in that. But what's also quite interesting is that he's figured out when the next Yuga shift is coming. Because like, as you, Lee, I've also been, when I researched or whenever I hear about the Yuga shifts or whatever, it's also, some people say it's 3,000 years, some people say it's 30,000 years. I thought it was related to the precession, the Earth's precession. Like I thought that might be a Yuga shift or whatever. And but anyway, so he's been researching it for many years, and he's kind of like because I thought it was an Indian like belief system, like a kind of a philosophy or belief system from India.
Yeah.
The Yugas, but apparently it was also studied by the Greeks, the Romans, the Mesopotamia, and he's been trying to put them all together to find out exactly what's going on and how they relate to each other. And also there's all this debate about, are we coming out of the Kali Yuga? Because the Kali Yuga is the dark ages, of consciousness, and that's why we're always fighting and killing each other and, all of this, and we're angry and fear-mongering. And so everybody thinks we're in the Kali Yuga. But then Sadhguru thinks that we're coming out of the Teta Yuga, which is like, Kali Yuga is the dark ages, then it's the Dwapara Yuga, which is like a bronze age, and then the Treta, which is the silver age, and then the Sati, which is the golden age. So according to Sadhguru, we're coming out of the, which, I respect Sadhguru as a great yogi, but he's on YouTube. I mean, I'm not accessible to every yogi in India because, I mean, probably all of the really great ones are not even on YouTube. It's the only one I can access. And I really respect his work, but I'm not saying he's the know-it-all of all yogis. So, but he's quite knowledgeable, and I do believe he has certain kind of mystical kind of experiences and can access information that we can't as mortal human beings. But he says we're going into the Treta Yoga, which is the silver age, before the Sati Yuga, which is the golden age. So I want to speak to Bibhu about that and see what he says about that. And then also, what's also quite exciting is that, well, I don't know if it's exciting, but he says he knows when the Yuga shift is ending, and it's going to be a huge cataclysm that Edgar Casey, which we've also discussed on the show quite a few times, the sleeping prophet, he predicted that it was going to be in 25 or something like that, and everyone thought it was it was going to be in the 1925. There was going to be a huge, I think it was 1925. Anyway, there was going to be a huge cataclysm for Edgar Casey's thing, but he didn't actually say 1925. He just said 25. So Bibhu has, in his research, thinks it's going to be next year, March 2025. And he'll explain his whole theory or his findings or whatever you want to call it, his belief. So that's I'm really excited for it, man. We're going to hear when the world's going to end, and it's very soon, next year. Think about that.
Well, apparently, according to some of the research, the little that I have done, it talks about every cycle has different age limits to the people that live in that cycle. So at one of the cycles, I think it might be the golden age, people's ages are like thousands of years. And as it gets worse and worse and worse, so it drops further and further down to like where we currently are, the Kali Yuga, I think it is, where your age limit is between like 50 and 80 or something.
Yes, and that's what he says in his book. He talks about that exactly. That's like, yes, in the Sati Yuga and the Golden Era, and that's also like when you read the Bible, you see Moses is like 500 years old or whatever, and like everyone is living to like these incredible feats of age, and then it just starts getting worse and worse and worse until we're around.
But I'm assuming I'm assuming with the shift, William. Look, in the current climate that we have, so the atmospheric conditions, the heat, the cold, obviously with the food that we eat, this all contributes to our age cycle. And I think that's kind of why we're all more or less between 50 and 80, like I said a little bit earlier. I'm assuming that then with every new age, with every yuga, something happens where it changes the atmosphere, changes the conditions that we live in to enable us to live longer. Because it would need to take quite a big cataclysm for us to now live to 1,000 years. That's almost like 10 times the amount of time that we're living now. You know what I mean? So it would have to take some massive cataclysm to change everything as we know it to be able to get to that point. That's kind of where I have a bit of an issue with it, because I wouldn't know how that would happen. It would have to be massive, dude.
Yeah. But that's what he says in his book. He says that every shift in the Kali Yuga, there is like some kind of cataclysm. Because basically how it works, or in my understanding, I'll check what he says, but it's like how is that there's the great central sun of the Milky Way, and scientists say it's a black hole or sun, whatever you want to call it, and we are circling it in like a bit of an elliptical kind of circular fashion, and like when we get closer, when we get to the point where we're closest to the sun, the great central sun of the Milky Way or the black hole, that's when the enlightened age is. And then when it comes out on an elliptical form, and then we the furthest away we are from it, that's the Kali Yuga. And that takes however long, how many thousands of years it is to circulate around the whole Milky Way galaxy. And with that, because obviously whatever that sun or the black hole, whatever, has all that magnetic force or whatever on our planet, it can cause stress on the planets and have like tectonic shifts and cataclysms with volcanic eruptions and earthquakes and stuff like that, and a lot of global warming and global changes, climate changes and stuff. That could be a cataclysm that happens all the time whenever we go through one of these shifts. But anyway, sorry, I'm just waffling on. Bibhu's he's here. He wants to enter. Shall I enter and get him in?
Yeah.
How's it, Bibhu? How's it going?
Oh, good, man. Good.
Yeah. But cool. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, Bibhu. I'm a really fan of your work and everything you've done and your new book. And just thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks. Thanks a lot for inviting me. And have you read the book, or did you read some of the articles, or?
Yes, and also the one with Edgar Cayce is also the one that I'm very particularly interested in. So, okay. So let's just jump straight into it. So, firstly, I mean, I try to give an intro in the beginning and and trying to explain like the Yuga Shift and some of your principles in the book your book and that, but I think you're going to obviously explain it a lot better. So, firstly, what is your background and how did you get into this whole research of the Yuga Shifts?
Well, by profession, I'm an engineer and an MBA, and I was working as a technology consultant for a long time. But it was while I was working that I got interested in these ancient mysteries. I started reading a lot of books, and then I traveled to a few places. I went to Egypt and to Mexico. And then what happened is that I started noticing a lot of connections, the cultural and spiritual connections between India and the other cultures. So that's when I started getting interested. I started writing some articles on my blog. And then there was this whole excitement about the Mayan calendar ending in 2012. And that got me thinking into what does the Yuga cycle of India tell us about it. So that's what got me interested in the Yuga cycle. And then when I started exploring it in more detail, I noticed that there are a number of errors that have crept into the traditional texts in India. And some people have tried to correct it, but I didn't feel convinced by the corrections that have been done. And so I started my own research. And then in 2012, I came out with an article where I proposed a slightly different model. And I said that the Kali Yuga is ending in 2025. And that was still, 13 years in the distance, comfortably 13 years in the distance, and nothing to get worried about. But now it's 2024, which means the projected end of the Kali Yuga that I was talking about is right next year. So yeah, so after I wrote the article, what happened is a lot of people started contacting me. I received a lot of messages on my blog, a lot of emails, and I started doing a lot of additional research because I hadn't yet pieced together all the missing pieces of information. And so it took me a long time. I never thought that I'll be writing a book, but over a period of time, what happened is I got so much information, I realized that I can put it together in the form of a book, and that's what I did. And it came out last year, although I was hoping I could bring it out much earlier than that, but it took a lot of time to put together all the pieces. And so the book is out there now. It's called Yuga Shift, as you mentioned, and it's on Amazon, so anybody who's interested can get it there.
Okay, and then Bibhu, if you could explain to the audience kind of what is a Yuga Shift? What are we talking about? Because a little bit of research that I did earlier, I was chatting to Will just before you came on. There's a guy that I was listening to on YouTube. I can't remember his name, but he was talking about a long count and a short count. The long count is X amount of years. The short count was 7,000 years. So I couldn't really understand what he was saying about all that. So could you perhaps explain that?
Yeah. See, the concept of the Yuga cycle was known to all the ancient cultures. The Greeks called it the Great Year or the Platonic Year. And the Hopi referred to it by the four worlds, the four previous worlds. And the Aztecs knew it as the four suns. So even the Egyptians knew about it, because when the Egyptian priest of Sais, he was talking to Solon, who had gone to Egypt, he was talking about the same concept as the Yuga cycle. And the concept is that human civilizations does not go in a linear pattern from primitive cave dwellers to us. It actually moves in cycles. And these cycles are basically dictated by the level of our consciousness. It is not dictated by the level of our material wealth or by our technologies. That's not an indicator. It's dictated by what is the level of consciousness of the people. And that is reflected in the amount of joy and wisdom and peace and harmony that you have in the civilization, and how much you really understand about your connections with the planet Earth, your connections with the rest of the universe, about your purpose. These are the big questions, and the ancients knew the answers to these big questions, which is why they were always in tune with their own inner self, and they were in tune with the rest of the cosmos. But we lost that connection as we degraded from the golden age, or the Satya Yuga. That's what we call it in Sanskrit. It's the Satya Yuga. And we moved to the Kali Yuga, which is the current age. And in the Greek terminology, this is the Iron Age. And so there was a degradation of consciousness, and that reflected in a lot of evils in our society that we see around us today. All of the greed and the selfishness and the violence and the war. That is the manifestation of this degradation of consciousness. And what also happens is that the environment reflects the state of consciousness back to us. So the environment also became less pure, became less fertile, more catastrophes, more diseases, and so on and so forth. So that's the whole concept of the Yuga cycle, that we move from a state of purity, from a state of elevated consciousness to a state of degraded consciousness, and the environment also degrades in tandem with our decline in our consciousness. And then there's a turnaround. So just as there's a gradual decline, there's also a gradual upswing. So we then gradually start moving back to the next golden age. It doesn't happen overnight, because nothing happens overnight. Because in all the cycles of time that we see in nature, whether it's the cycle of day and night or the cycle of seasons, we'll see that the intensity of light, it gradually increases and gradually decreases, so that it allows our body to get harmonized with the changes in the vibrations. And similarly, in the concept of the yugas also, we gradually degrade, and then we go on this upward cycle when once again the consciousness starts improving. And it's not just human consciousness, it's also our physical structure, our cranial capacities, all of that have declined. And there's a lot of scientific data which shows that we have become smaller over the last 12,000 years of the descending Yuga cycle. Our cranial capacities have declined by nearly 15%. And every anthropologist knows that. But it's a secret that they only talk about between themselves. They don't write any articles in popular magazines or newspapers disclosing this information, because goes against the traditional Darwinian paradigm. According to that, our cranial capacities have increased by 15% from the Homo erectus to Homo sapiens. And they said that it was because of this increase in our cranial capacities that we invented all the skills of civilization, all the amenities, all the knowledge that we have today. It was because of this 15% increase in cranial capacity over the past 2 million years. And now what they find is that in the last 12,000 years, you've lost exactly the same amount of gray matter that we supposedly acquired in 2 million years of evolution. And they don't have an answer to this, which is why they don't ever talk about it. But you'll find it in every anthropological journal that this is a fact. So this decline is reflected not only in our state of consciousness, it's there in our physical structures, in our cranial capacities, it's also reflected in the environment. It's a very real cycle. And because during the time of the colonial expansion, what happened was people started assuming that we've already reached the pinnacle of civilization, and therefore the linear model is the right one. And the cyclical model, which was followed by all the Asian societies, couldn't be true. So that was overturned at that point of time. And through continuous repetition, that has now become a dogma, a fact. But if you look deeply into the data, you'll find that this fact is not actually supported by scientific data.
Okay, so you were mentioning 12,000 years. Is that the period of the Yuga cycle, 12,000 years?
Yeah, there are two back-to-back cycles, a 12,000-year descending cycle and a 12,000-year ascending cycle, which adds up to a 24,000-year cycle. Okay. This is the model that a great Indian saint called Sri Yukteswar had proposed in the 19th century. And this is also the model that aligns with other models that we have in Greece or other cultures. But there's a problem. There's also an astronomical cycle called the precession of the equinoxes. And what happens in the course of the precession of the equinoxes is that the position of the sun during the time of the spring equinox, which is currently in Pisces, it actually keeps shifting. So in another decade or maybe in 100 years, the position of the sun during the spring equinox will move to Aquarius. And in this manner, the position of the sun goes through all the 12 constellations in a period of 25,800 years, which was called the precession of the equinoxes. And all the ancient cultures knew about this cycle. And one of the main questions that I had when I had first written that article in 2012 is, why do we have this discrepancy of between the Yuga cycle of 24,000 years and the precession cycle of 25,800 years? So that was one of the big questions that I couldn't answer at that point of time. And then later I found out that these two half cycles, the descending cycle and the ascending cycle, they are separated by two long periods of transition, each of which is 1,200 years. And the Greeks call this period of transitions as cataclysmos, which means deluge. So during one of these transitions, there's a big deluge. And they also called it the great winter of the great year, because that time you also have a period of freezing cold temperatures. And the other big transition they called as ekpyrosis, which means burning or conflagration. So in this particular transition, the world is destroyed by fire, destroyed and renewed by fire. So one part is about ice and water. The second transition is about fire. So once you plug in these two missing pieces, then the duration of the entire cycle becomes exactly equal to the precession cycle of the Earth. So it's a valid astronomical cycle. It's not something somebody invented. It was a cycle known to the ancients and tracked by the ancients. So that's the model that I have in the book.
Okay, so now let me ask you a question. So this is it's kind of making sense to me now, because obviously with our podcast, our previous podcast, we've been chatting a lot about certain things. So what we're saying is, we currently the Kali Yuga, if I'm correct, Bibhu?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now at the beginning of the Kali Yuga, we had an upsurge. Then I'm assuming the great issue that happened in the world was the Younger Dryas. That was the Ice Age that you're talking about, which is about 12,000 years ago, which is what I'm assuming. Then 12,000 years, we started degrading. And then we're coming now towards the end of the Kali Yuga, which you will tell us now when that's going to happen. But then from there, it's going to be an uptake again. But you're saying this is going to be by fire now.
Yeah, first there's a period of transition when the world is destroyed and renewed.
Yeah.
And then there's a small, then we start the ascent to the next golden age. So at the end of each of these half cycles, there's a renewal, destruction, and renewal of civilization. And this is something that all the ancient cultures are believed in. And so we are now heading towards that period of destruction and renewal of civilization by fire.
Okay. And when do you think that is? When do you say that is, people?
Well, the Kali Yuga is ending in 2025.
Okay.
And the period of transition that follows is a long one of 1200 years. And so throughout this period, you're going to experience a lot of meteor and comet activity, because that's what happened last time around. That stream of meteors and comets are going to come back again because it's a cycle. And so you're going to have a lot of meteor and comet activity, which is going to purify, because meteor and comet activities, they purify through destruction. So when you destroy something through fire, what happens is that you're automatically purifying the environment. And we know that we have really degraded our environment with so much toxic pollution generated over the last few hundred years. So that will take a lot of time to clean up. So that's the period when you clean up the environment. But there's another component to it, and that is the purification of the consciousness, or the purification of the soul. And we also know that there's a lot of evil in the world right now. So what all the ancient texts tell us is that when the Yuga cycle comes to an end, then there's the emergence of avatar or a savior or a messiah who comes and who kills the evil people, and then he reestablishes the dharma, or the righteous code, which people then start following. For instance, in the Bible, they talk about the Messiah coming and setting up a kingdom of God on earth for 1,000 years. And in the Kala Chakra Tantra, which is the Tibetan sacred text, they say that when Rudra Chakran comes back to the world, he's going to destroy all the barbarians in a battle, and he's going to set up a kingdom of peace for 1,000 years. So in both cases, you have this reference to 1,000 years. And this 1,000 years is what is the period that I'm calling as ekpyresis, the purification by fire. Although this is going to be a time when the planet is cleansed and renewed, but it's also going to be a time when a lot of divine energies come into this planet, very, very powerful divine energies come into the planet. So the mind and the soul will be uplifted, and people will lead a much better existence, almost a utopian existence, even though there's a lot of destruction. Because when you are at a higher state of consciousness, you understand why that cleansing is happening, and where you need to go, and where you need to move, and how you need to live. So you are not really bothered about that. What is more important is the state of consciousness at which people live during this period. And that's going to be very elevated because of some very powerful energies that are going to come into this planet in the next 15 years.
Okay. And you're saying that's, so next year, when next year is the beginning? Or the end of this one and going into the beginning?
Yeah, the Kali Yuga ends in March 21st of 2025.
Okay.
So it's on the spring equinox date that this cycle changes over. So after that, we go into this period of transition. And my research tells me that in a span of 15 years, between 2025 to 2040, our civilization is very likely to collapse due to combination of wars, because typically what happens during Yuga ending period is that there's a lot of violence, a lot of war. And we've seen that from our ancient texts, which tell us that every time we go from one age to another age, one Yuga to another Yuga, there's always a big war and a lot of death and fighting. So that is something that we can anticipate going forward. And we can already see the beginnings of that violence already happening in the world today. So that's the first part. And the second part is See, every time we went from the silver, let's say we started this descending cycle of 12,000 years, that in turn is now broken up into 4 ages. So you have Silver Age or Treta Yuga, you have a Dwapara Yuga or the Bronze Age, and then you have two back-to-back Iron Ages or Kali Yuga. The reason why you have two back-to-back is the first part of the Iron Age, there's a decline in both material and spiritual dimensions of our life. But in the second part, which is the part we are in right now, there's an upliftment in the material dimensions of life, but the spiritual dimension still continues to decline until it hits the rock bottom at the end of this particular age. So which is why right now in the world, you see that there's a big gap between matter and spirit. So there's a lot of technology, a lot of affluence in many parts of the world. At the same time, there's also a lot of greed and hatred and meanness in society. So there's this big gap right now in our consciousness, which is going to, and the purpose of this energies that come into the planet during the Yuga ending periods is to dissolve this gap so that our material and the spiritual dimensions of our life are in harmony and they go hand in hand. So what I anticipate is that after 2025, there's going to be a period of war, and then there's a particular swarm of comets called the Taurid resonance swarm. See, there's this the planet Earth goes around the sun, we run into a lot of meteor streams, right? Throughout the year, we run into a lot of meteor streams. And one of these meteor streams is called the Taurid meteor stream, which is the largest stream of meteors in the inner solar system. And we pass through this swarm in this meteor stream in May and June, and once again in between November and December, because it's like a curve. Any meteor stream is basically a river of debris which is left behind by a comet. So when a comet passes around the sun, it leaves behind this rubble along its path. And that's what constitutes a meteor stream. And the Taurid meteor stream, a lot of astronomers have postulated, was created by a giant comet that came into the inner solar system around 20 to 30,000 years ago. And it started breaking up in stages to create this particular stream. But this parent comet, along with a lot of large comets, child comets, are still there hiding within the core of this stream. And every few thousand years, every 2,500, 3,000 years, we run through the center of this swarm. That's when we get hit by a number of factors, a number of large asteroids and meteors, and they cause a lot of damage. For instance, last time this happened was during the late Bronze Age, when all the Bronze Age civilizations collapsed between 1200 to 800 BC over a period of 400 years. All the Bronze Age civilizations totally collapsed. And then all of these Iron Age civilizations that we are living in right now, they all started coming up at around the same time, around 700 or 600 BCE. And we don't have any trace left of all the civilizations that existed before that. It happened everywhere, all over the world. And similarly, when the Bronze Age has started around 3600 BC, it started all of a sudden in India and Mesopotamia and Egypt. We all had these Bronze Age civilizations. But what happened to all the Neolithic societies that existed prior to that? They all disappeared between 3600 to 4000 BC. So there's always this reset which takes place approximately 3000 years. There's a reset which takes place. You have a new wave of civilizations with new artistic skills, new religious beliefs, new modes of governance. They come up. So this and the ancients knew about it. They said that every 3,000 years is approximately the duration of a yuga. And every time a yuga ends, a new yuga comes up with a new set of beliefs and new set of new dharma or new codes of conduct. So this has been going on. And now that we'll be ending the Kali Yuga, what will happen is that this particular stream, we're again going to pass through this stream in 2032 and 2036, which I believe is likely to be quite catastrophic for us.
Okay, so Bibhu, a quick one now. Next year, yes, we know we can see the wars around the globe. It's just becoming, ridiculous. It sounds like when you talk about destruction of fire, I'm hoping seriously that it's not nuclear war, because that's going to be just total annihilation almost. But then on top of all of that, you're going to have the meteors hitting the Earth as well, which is going to cause even more devastation. So as much as we're going to have more enlightened people due to the energies coming through, I think it's going to be very, very difficult times for everybody on this planet. What do you say to people? You say, right, watch out next year, so 2025, right through for the next 11 years, maybe 15 years, it's going to be bad. So what do you say to people to say, look, don't worry, because, this is, look inwards or look here or look there, this will help you. How do we help the people? What do we tell them? Because it's bad news. I mean, for next year. I don't want to go. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
I want to hear some good stuff.
Look, even if it wasn't the yoga ending period, it's still bad news because sometimes the status quo can be more frightening than the change that is on the way. And so yeah, we already see a lot of wars, and that there are rich people who are building these doomsday bunkers everywhere. They're basically pushing us to Armageddon. And what happens when we look back, seems to happen is that every time these periods of change come up, a lot of people incarnate whose job is to take us to that big war, and you can't really stop it by any kind of reason. So that's one part of it. And how you prepare for a war, I mean, I think that's something people can figure out. You don't live in big cities. You just move to places where nobody would want to bomb. I mean, for instance, the Hopi people, they live in the middle of Arizona, and they say that at the end of this particular world, the fourth world, that's what they say, there's going to be this blue star Kachina, which is going to show up in the skies. And the blue star Kachina is obviously a comet, because a comet has a blue tail, which contains carbon monoxide ions. That's why it looks blue. And they say that this blue star is going to fall with a great crash, which means it's going to hit us. And it says that following that, there's going to be a lot of warfare, and it's going to be a war between matter and spirit, in which spirit is ultimately going to win. And they also say that the people who take shelter in the Hopi lands, they're going to be saved. And that's pretty logical, because who would want to go and bomb Arizona, the middle of the desert in Arizona? Nobody would want that. So obviously, if you're going into a war, the best place is to go somewhere where nobody would want to bomb you. But the second part is more challenging. What if you run through a meteor shower or a swarm of comets? And how do you get saved there? And what I'm saying is that this comet swarms, it's not accidental. It's not random. It's all orchestrated. It's a part of a great divine plan, if you will, to reset civilization. So there are always some people who survive these catastrophes, and they act as the seed of the new civilization that emerges in the next cycle. And this has, even in the transition from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, there were people who survived and carried at least some of the Bronze Age skills into the next cycle, although a lot of it was lost. So even now, there are going to be survivors. And so question is, how do you ensure that you don't get, it's going to get pretty dark, because if you have a lot of wars and if there's a lot of violence, then it's obviously a very difficult time to live through. So you need to turn inward. You need to basically disconnect or detach yourself from the decaying energies of the Kali Yuga. And the energies of the Kali Yuga are about more materialism. It's about more selfishness, more hatred. So you have to bring that down. You need to look into your own inner self and figure out, do I have that within me? Because if you start weeding out any kind of greed or selfishness or hatred from within your own consciousness, then you're automatically making yourself eligible for the next cycle. And what the Hopi say is that every time a particular civilization ends, some of the righteous people are directed to safe locations underground. What that basically means is that people get messages from some sources or by some means by which they're guided to safe locations, whether it's underground or whether it's some other place. I can't say right now, but those who are, I think those who are tuning out of the energies of the Kali Yuga and tuning into the energies of the Yuga that is on the way, which is of love and oneness and harmony and peace. I think they will not only be able to see through what's happening and thereby prepare themselves mentally for the tough conditions that are on the way, but they will also give themselves chance of surviving through this catastrophe and emerging on the other side of this narrow bottleneck that humanity is likely to pass through in the next 15 odd years. So I think it's a choice that we have to make as people, whether we want to keep getting entangled in this Kali Yuga energies, or do you want to come out of the Kali Yuga energies and align with the energies of the Yuga that is on the way, that is already coming into our planet right now, and it's going to get more and more intense as time goes on.
Okay, then I'm not sure what your thoughts are on extraterrestrial beings. If you believe that perhaps these guys exist, do you think these extraterrestrials would assist us when it's coming to, like you're saying, the going underground? We've heard a lot of stories about certain extraterrestrial beings living underground. We've heard certain extraterrestrials living in the water. Now, obviously, under the water, you'd be pretty safe from most of meteors and stuff that are hitting the Earth, because I mean, that'd be unless it was massive. Do you think these guys, if you believe in it, do you think these guys would assist us if we, at that certain vibration, at that certain level, they would take those people down?
Yeah. See, I mean, when you talk about extraterrestrials, we are probably talking about subterrestrials, people who live underground, rather than people who are coming from some other part of the cosmos. Because so many UFOs have been seen coming out of waters and going inside waters. And also when I look at a lot of these Indian texts which talk about Vimanas, which are nothing but UFOs in the ancient times, they say that these Vimanas are regulated by beings who live underground in a place called Patala. Patala means place which is underground. So these Vimanas are regulated by underworld beings. And we know from our mythological texts that there's so many kinds of underworld beings. That you have these dwarfs or the gnomes, you have the elves and the fairies, and so many other kind of beings. And when you look at some of the UFO reports, especially the early ones, they talk about dwarf beings with large eyes. So which kind of reminds me of the gnomes that we hear in our mythologies, which means that they could be playing a role in this whole UFO story. And the Hopi people, what they say is that every time one of their world ends, the ant people, they take them underground. And when they talk about the ant people, they're actually talking about the dwarfs, because the Maya, they refer to their dwarfs using the same term, which is ant people. You know that they are the dwarfs of European mythology, and they are the dwarfs of Indian mythology as well. We call them yakshas in India.
Yeah, those
So
are the
these
greys you
guys-
talk about, eh? The greys, yeah.
The greys look just like ants.
Yeah.
The greys look just like ants.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're not saying greys, because it makes you sound more credible. Because if we said greys,
Yeah, we can.
we just sound like a bunch of we sound like nut. We can, because we got a nutty show. But I love it when people don't use the words greys, because then they sound more credible. That's great.
No, but I think Bibhu is correct, because if you go back into the Celtic beliefs, and this is going back thousands of years ago, the whole, exactly what it's saying, the fairies, if you go into Scotland and Ireland now, and you go and speak to people about fairy folk and, these beings that live at certain stone circles and certain things, this is old. This is not something new. And it's exactly as you said, these beings have been around us and are underground.
And it's across the world. It's not just the Celtic people or just the Hopi people or the Maya people or India. It's everywhere. You have the same belief system that there's this race of people who live underground, and they used to help humans in the earlier ages, and they used to be worshipped. For instance, the Maya used to really revere their dwarfs, and they used to come to the Maya. There are depictions of Maya kings sitting with their dwarf advisors, and they apparently were very good scribes, and they invented the Maya glyphs, the Maya writing system, and they could see into the future. And a lot of these Maya books of prophecies, like the book of Chilambalam, they were supposedly composed by these dwarfs. And I suspect that the reason why the Maya suddenly disappeared is probably because the dwarfs told them something about their own civilization coming to an end, which is why they ran off to the forest even before the Spanish could get there. So yeah, in India we have the yakshas, and people used to set up shrines under the trees to pray to them for fertility and for prosperity. They're mainly they mainly help you if you're infertile, or if you're not growing enough crops. They do something to the fields which make the crops grow. So they used to be worshipped, but then around 1,500 years ago or 2,000 years ago, we started losing the contact with these beings, and then they slowly drifted into myths and legends. And but now it seems with the increase in UFO sightings and with the increase in sightings of these alien beings, it seems that we are kind of reaching a place where this contact might be reestablished again. But they're pretty reluctant to talk to us because our consciousness has really degraded over the last 2,000 years. And they might be shocked to see what has happened to human civilization over the last 2,000 years when they were not here, probably because they were maybe hibernating or something. I don't know. So yeah, they're reluctant to interact with us right now. But yes, regarding your question, I do believe that uh, when this turmoil happens, whether through wars or through climate impacts, these beings are going to play an important role in escorting some people to safety. And that's what they talk about in the Christian text also, right? In the Revelation, they say that the angels are going to come. The angels are nothing but these beings will come and save the people and take them to safe locations.
Funny that you mentioned it because but with Dolores Cannon, when she does all those hypnotists, when she hypnotizes all the people that have had abduction experiences, they all say that they've been trained to be, well, a lot of them, like they say that they've been shown that they need to be in a place where something mass is going to happen, and they're going to be directing the people where to go, like all these abductees. And that like makes sense that maybe these people like come, all the abductions or whatever, that they've planted some kind of memory in their head. Like if this happens, then you're going to be the one that's going to show them where the ships are, where to go, hiding underground. And now that you mention all of this stuff, maybe that's just what's going to happen. That's just very fascinating.
Yeah, and they seem to be some kind of scientists. They seem to be some kind of subterrestrial scientists because they're always seen collecting samples from they collect samples of the soil or the stones or vegetation. And when they sometimes they take samples of your blood as well. When the abduction happens, they kind of prick you with different kind of injections, and they sample your blood. So they keep on doing some kind of studies about the state of health of our planet and our physiological health as well. I don't know what kind of studies they're doing, but they seem to be keeping tabs on our planetary health. Yeah, I was reading this book about UFOs, and this lady, she was interviewing some Native Americans living in Mesoamerica. And a lot of these people say that they have received prophecies from them. They have said that our world is going to go into a very difficult phase very soon, and that we need to transform ourselves and transform our ways. And so they have left some very difficult prophecies for the time to come, which kind of agrees with my own research about the Yuga ending time that we're going into.
Okay, it's a bit scary, the coming, but it sounds interesting. I think this is going to be a period, as much as it's going to be a fearful thing. I think it's going to be a very interesting period, especially if all this other stuff starts happening. It would be something to witness.
Exactly. I mean, I think when people, when I read the ancient texts of India, when people were moving in the descending cycle and they were going from, let's say, the Silver Age to the Bronze Age, or from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, they were really worried because they were thinking that what's going to happen to our world? All our virtues would be lost, and it's going to be such a dark place. And now that we are going to come out of the Kali Yuga, it doesn't make any sense to be worried. I mean, we should be happy that the dark energies are going to go, and very soon we are going to move into a world which is going to be dramatically different in terms of our virtues and our energies. But we need to go through that difficult period, and I think every person understands that none of us are immortal. Although we get plenty of chances to reincarnate and learn our life lessons, we're not immortal. What is more important is to understand that we're going to go through a period of great learning and great revelation. You're going to see things happen which haven't happened in the last 12,000 years. You're going to experience energies that you haven't experienced in the last 8,000 years. And that's a big deal, to see things that you haven't seen before, to experience energies that you haven't experienced before, to see all of this evil that is, permeating our planet at this point, to see that get wiped out. I think that's the big experience that you should look forward to. And all of us who have incarnated on this planet at this time, I think many of us, I think, are already geared for this challenge. We know what lies ahead, and we should look forward positively and not get scared by what's going to happen.
It's so funny, Bibhu, that you mentioned that, because I'm actually making a documentary at the moment. And I was speaking to a hypnotist, a past life regression hypnotist, and she said to me that that's why a lot of souls are reincarnating at this specific time. That's why we've got such a large population, and that's why it's because all these souls have come to witness something that is massive that's going to happen, and they've all been reincarnated to witness this, and that's why there's all these reincarnations right now. And well, sorry, not reincarnated, like so many incarnations on this at this time.
Absolutely, I think so, because what happens, a lot of us have had incarnations in the higher yugas, and a lot of us know or can feel that something big is happening. At the same time, a lot of evil people have also reincarnated at this time, and their job is to take us to that end time scenario. So everybody has a role to play, and so I think it's great time to be born in, because as I said, it's going to be an experience that you can't purchase with money. This is not something you can watch in a movie theater, because you'll be part of that whole theater yourself. And which is why it's also important to talk about it, so that people lose their fear. The more you talk about it and more you understand what we are going into, you kind of lose your fear and you make yourself open to the possibilities that are opening up.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And like the thing is, I mean, as exciting as I think it is to see something so epic like that, and also be obviously terrifying, and I feel sometimes I'm okay with it, but obviously I say that until it actually happens, and I'm like, oh my God, I wish it's not happening. But when I think about my daughter, that's when it scares me, because I don't want to see my daughter, like if that's going to happen, and I see how scared she's going to be, and like how terrified, and that's what scares me, because like I don't know how I'm going to react to that. That's terrifying.
Well, now you need to prepare. You got just less than a year, but prepare her, get strong.
Get to the Hopis.
Well, yeah, I have a
it'll be cheaper to fly to the Hopis than build a bunker, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It might be comparable because the way the flight fares are increasing these days. I heard that you might get a good bunker for $250,000. So yeah,
that's out of my price range.
Yeah, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, I think I'll be staying at home.
Chip in. Why don't we chip in and we get one all together?
We charter a ship out to the ocean.
We just need to flag down those UFOs. I mean, that's our best option.
Just a quick question. I've got a last one from my side before I'm done. I'm just going to head back a little bit. The pyramids and all the pyramidal structures around the globe. It's always been my assumption that these came prior to 12,000 BC. So I've always thought that these were perhaps built by an intelligence that were beyond what we are currently, and it kind of makes sense that you're saying we degraded from 12,000 BC, that after the Younger Dryas. So is it your opinion as well that perhaps the pyramids that we see today and all the pyramidal structures around the world are actually prior to 12,000 BC, when we still understood everything about frequencies and all those kind of things?
Well, it depends, because the Mayan pyramids are not so old. I mean, the Mayan pyramids were built during the Maya period, which is around 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. The concept is very old. The concept itself is very old, but all the structures are not so old. Mm. And for regarding the pyramids in Egypt, which is what people mainly think about when they're talking about pyramids, or the Great Sphinx, if you read the prophecies of Casey, he says that it was built after the Ice Age was over. And some people from Atlantis, they came to Egypt, and then they built the Sphinx, and they built a temple in front of the Sphinx. And they brought a lot of tablets with them, which had their histories and all their knowledge. They buried it underground. People think that it's under the Sphinx, and they keep on digging up the Sphinx for that. But if you really read the Edgar Cayce prophecies closely, you'll find that he was actually talking about the old Sphinx temple that is right in front of the Sphinx. And the Sphinx is basically guarding that temple. And he's done a good job, because till now nobody has dug under the temple to take out those tablets. So the Sphinx has done its purpose. But it's still there. According to Cayce, those tablets are still there. So based on that prophecy and based on the dating that was done by Robert Schoch, he said that the Sphinx must have been built when there was this great African humid period, which was after the end of the Ice Age till around 4,000 BC, for around 6,000 years. Sahara, there was a lot of rainfall in the Sahara. So I would guess that it was probably built at the beginning of the descending cycle at around 9,600 BC or around 9,000 BC, after the end of the Younger Dryas period.
Okay.
Because Robert Schoch said that erosion on the Sphinx was actually, well, he said 15,000 years of erosion.
He said that
or older. But he said, I think he was being cautious because he didn't want to sound too crazy. But
he said that it must have been built before the African humid phase ended. The humid phase ended at around 4,000 BC, that is 6,000 years ago. And he said that it must have been built at least 7,000 years ago or more. And then later he said that it was probably built at around 10,000 BC. So initially he said 7,000 years ago, and then he said 12,000 years ago. But nobody knows the actual exact date, because it's a approximation. I mean, it could be any time in that time frame. So which is why I brought up Cayce, because he at least gives us something specific, that it was after the end of Atlantis that people came here and buried the tablets, which means it was probably after the end of the Younger Dryas and maybe at the beginning of the current descending cycle.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, and also talking about Edgar Cayce, but Edgar Cayce's prophecy about the end of the world of 2025?
Yeah, Cayce did a prophecy that it's going to be in 36. He said that in 36, the Messiah is going to come and we are going to see his light in the sky. And he said that at least on 3 separate occasions. And Cayce's readings, they're very consistent, even though they might be spread apart by many years. What he says in, let's say, 2032, he'll back that up in 1932. He'll back that up in 1934 in a separate reading. So it's pretty consistent. And on 3 separate occasions, he says that the light of the Messiah will be seen in 36. And most of the scholars in the 20th century, they assume that Cayce must have been talking about 1936. And they said that, oh, he must have got that wrong, because 1936 went by and nothing really happened. What I'm saying in my book is that he probably meant 2036 and not 1936. Never said 1936. He just said 36. And he probably meant the 36th year of the new century. And 36 really matches up with my analysis, because we passed through this torrid swarm, through the center of this swarm in the years 2032 and 2036. Which is why I believe these are the 2 crucial years when it comes to comet and meteor impacts. And if you look at the description of Christ on a horse with a sword coming out of his mouth, or the description of Kalki avatar of Hinduism, who comes riding on a horse holding a sword, that actually describes a comet, because a comet has 2 tails. One is a curvy white tail, which kind of looks like a horse, which is why there's a kind of comet which is described as a horse comet, because it actually looks like a horse. And the sword is the other tail of the comet, which is the long, straight blue tail that you have. And that tail is often described as a sword. A lot of cultures describe comets as swords, as the sword of God with which he cleans away evil. So the horse and the sword, they're both descriptions of comets. So which is why I believe that this whole idea of a man riding a horse carrying a sword is actually talking about the activation of a very powerful comet within the torrid swarm, which is going to hit us either in 2032 or in 2036. And that is the same thing that Cayce was also talking about, because he also says that in 2036, our planet is going to be impacted by an outside force, which is going to disturb it in its orbit. and then the sun is going to be darkened, and the earth is going to break up in many places. These are all descriptions of a cometary apocalypse, because it's a comet that hits you from outside in your orbit, and the comet dust darkens the sky. And if it hits the earth, then it breaks up the continental shelves. So Casey was basically telling us of a cometary impact in 2036, and that's basically the key date in my book as well. Although we do pass through the swarm in 2032, I believe in 2032 we'll probably face some of the smaller blocks of stone, something to tell us that things are changing. It basically gives us another 4 years to kind of change our ways and to make ourselves more in tune with what's going to come. And in 2036, it is probably going to be like the D-Day, that when this big powerful comet comes and changes everything on the planet.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow,
She's
that is terrifying. Thanks, Bibhu. You've just ruined our evening.
and you can imagine the kind of energies that comet is going to bring. I mean, we've never seen a comet come very close to the Earth. If you can imagine a big, powerful comet coming into our atmosphere, the energies from that comet is just going to be mind-blowing. And what the prophecy says, that if you have already made yourself pure, if you've already purified your mind, then you'll be able to deal with those energies. But if you haven't, then it's going to be extremely difficult for you to survive through this period. So I was talking about the new energies coming in. That's one of the new energies that's likely to come in the next 15 years.
Bibhu, sorry, man. Last one from my side. What do you think of this planet X, this planet that's hiding behind Pluto? What do you think the story is there?
Well, Planet X is basically comes from Sitchin's analysis of the Mesopotamian text, right? He talks about Nibiru, which supposedly comes in every 3,600 odd years. And that is what basically gave rise to this whole concept of Planet X. There's something beyond the orbit of Pluto, which seems to be kind of disturbing the orbits of there. I don't know if there's a Planet X or not, but I think when the Mesopotamians were talking of Nibiru, Nibiru basically refers to Marduk, who was the king of the gods. And I believe that Nibiru itself refers to this comet that I'm talking about in the Taurus swarm. It's the activation of this comet, which happens periodically every 2,700 to 3,000 years, is what the Mesopotamians were also talking about. And this is what every text that I have looked at seems to be talking about. They're telling us about this big, powerful comet which comes about, cleanses the earth. And comets also bring in water. Comets, scientists say that they have a frozen nucleus, which is how they bring in water. And what I've also found out is that if a comet passes through our atmosphere, it's going to cause rainfall because it gives off a lot of water vapor and dust. That dust can act as a nucleating agent around which the water vapor can condense and cause rainfall. So comets not only destroy, they also bring us water, which is the elixir of life. And according to scientists such as Fred Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe, comets also seed the planet with new DNA and RNA molecules. Comets are the carriers of life across the universe. It's a theory that is called cometary panspermia. What they say is that there's life distributed across the universe. Comets, when they go across to other star systems, they bring that DNA, they seed the Earth with DNA, and they bring up new forms of life. And in my book, I said that this basically reminds me of what birds do on our planet. Birds, they carry basically the seeds. They disperse the seeds over long distances. And they help the vegetation to grow. And that is something that comets seem to be doing on a macrocosmic scale, just to scatter the seeds of life across the universe. So they're like cosmic birds. They're doing what birds are doing on our planet.
Awesome analogy.
So
awesome.
Yeah, that's very good. That's awesome. But do you think that the big flood in the biblical times, is that from the comet?
Yeah, that happened in that Younger Dryas period. We have a text here in India which talks about a swarm of 26 comets that hit us repeatedly over that 1,200-year period of Younger Dryas. And this text also says that the second comet in that swarm caused the flood. And then I read some biblical texts, and it seems that a lot of the biblical scholars, they believe that the flood was caused by a comet. And now I know that how it can happen, because if a comet goes through our atmosphere, it generates so much clouds, so much of it generates so much of rainfall that it can easily cause a flood. And again, if you read the text, they tell us that the flood was caused by rainfall. It wasn't really a tsunami or something like that. It was basically intense rainfall over a long period of time that caused the flood. And that kind of rainfall can be caused by a giant comet moving through our atmosphere. And there's also a geological evidence for that, because it seems that in the younger dryas period, there was a lot of rainfall, which shouldn't have happened, because in the younger dryas period, the glaciers were advancing. Sea level was also rising. So the groundwater should have gone down. And instead, what they find is that the groundwater was spilling over during the younger dryas period. And in many places, there were marshes. And that's very odd. You shouldn't have had groundwater spilling over. The only way that can be explained is if a large comet came into the solar system and came close to the Earth, and they basically deluged us with a huge amount of water, which caused the water levels to increase. And which is why all of these land masses that used to exist earlier in the Golden Age, they're all below water now. We have excess water on our planet for the last 12,000 years.
Wow. Fascinating, Bibhu. I must say, it's been absolutely such a pleasure speaking to you. I mean, it's just the amount of knowledge that comes out of you is just like that amount of water, that excess water we have on Earth. It's just comes springing out of that spring. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Bibhu. That was an amazing interview. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. It was nice to be here and talking to you. And those were pretty good questions. And I hope that your listeners enjoy listening to it.
Well, thanks, Bibhu.
Yes.
Yeah, much appreciated for your time, man. Thank you.
Wow, that was incredible. Lee?
Yeah.
What an amazing interview.
But the thing is, but you know, the thing is, I'm actually not. I'm actually looking forward to this, dude. So it might sound a bit dark, but everything from the beginning from season 1, we've mentioned certain things. And you know what? He's actually put everything into context.
Yeah, no,
everything in all our podcasts that we've done from day 1, from the Atlantis to, you know, whatever. Even when we spoke to Bart with his stuff, it's all put into context.
I think Bibhu's figured it all out. We've done it. We can just shut the show down.
Yeah, shut the show down. Done, man.
We figured it all out. We just clamber in and just wait for the end, man.
Yeah, no. I think we'll be podcasting right to the end. We'll be saying, we told you guys about the meteors that are coming in. Yeah, they are.
And we'll live stream it and broadcast the meteor just hitting the ground there.
Yeah. But even Revelation talks about the stars falling from the sky. So that would obviously be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was actually listening last night. I was actually laughing. I was listening last night to, I can't remember, it was a YouTube channel that they had a priest on and another guy, heavy Christian guys, and everything they talk about is heavy biblical related. But they're like flat earthers, but they believe the earth is flat. They believe the sun. They believe the sun is like just above the dome that we're living in. I'm just thinking, God, I can't actually believe. But they're relating everything to the Bible. They're commenting everything to say, but the Bible says this, the Bible says that, and that the stars are actually connected to the dome. So I'm just thinking, dude. Anyway, I was laughing. But anyway, so let's see what's coming. That's going to be, I think, as we're living in great times, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it is, as I said earlier, like it is exciting, but actually, I know when it's going to happen, it's going to be fucking scary.
But just prepare yourself, man. As he says, increase your vibration, which is exactly all the podcasts we've been talking about now, with Anthea, with all the guys that we've been talking to have all said, raise your vibrations, get to that level where you can start communicating with the astral realms. Get there, get to those places.
Yeah.
Because Bibhu's now just said the same thing. Yeah, we need to start increasing our vibration.
So you know where to stand so the meteor doesn't hit you. So
exactly.
You can predict the future.
Shift into the other dimension.
Yeah.
Hey, awesome, man. But anyway, yeah, well, thanks a lot again for, I'm always saying it every week, but thanks for your time. Again, thanks. I hope people enjoy this one. I hope the guys that are following us will be with us to witness these events. I really look forward to it, and I look forward to chatting to you guys next week. Thanks, everybody. Cheers. See you soon.